This is a wonderland.
Hey, I told you not to fucking touch me!
Apologize to the lady.
The story begins with John Brickner, a man newly released from prison after serving 4 years of a reduced 7-year sentence for a past murder. Eager to turn his life around and make amends, John moves to Seattle in search of a fresh start and finds work in construction. One evening, while heading to a bar, he witnesses 3 men harassing a waitress named Frankie. John intervenes, seizing one of the harassers and forcing him to apologize to Frankie. Intimidated by John's imposing presence, the men quickly backed off and fled. Impressed by his actions, the bar owner offered him a job as a security guard. John accepted the offer, balancing his days working construction and his nights maintaining order at the bar. The following day, John started his new job as a bar security guard. When 2 intoxicated patrons stirred up trouble, he quickly stepped in and removed them without hesitation. Observing from a distance, Frankie's boyfriend, Reno Paul Saint, took notice. Impressed by John's strength and composure, Reno approached him afterward, handed over his business card, and hinted at a different kind of job, encouraging John to reach out if he was interested. John respectfully turned down Reno's offer, already stretched thin, working 2 jobs. But one evening after work, he was unexpectedly confronted by Veronica, the widow of the man he had killed. It was she who had advocated for his early release, but her help came with a condition. She now demanded he raise $250,000 to fund her daughter's life-saving heart surgery. Driven by a need to make things right, John resolved to help Veronica. But after checking his savings, he quickly realized he was nowhere near the amount required. Desperate for options, he confided in Frankie, who led him to Reno. Reno took John to a concealed, bustling building. Inside was a loud, adrenaline-fueled underground fight arena. When John brought up the job, Reno revealed his true intention. He wanted John to compete in underground fights for money. Though the prize money was tempting, John, still on parole, firmly declined despite Reno's insistence. The next day, he visited Veronica to apologize, explaining that he couldn't help her after all. Hearing John's apology, Veronica sharply reminded him of the promise he made in prison to do whatever it takes to atone for his crime. Her raised voice caught the attention of her frail daughter, Sarah, who weakly appeared from her room. Seeing Sarah's fragile condition, John was overwhelmed with sorrow and guilt. Moved, he vowed to do everything necessary to raise the money for her treatment. The next morning, at the construction site, John was suddenly fired over a minor error. Moments later, his boss collapsed from a heart attack right before his eyes. Thinking fast, John administered first aid and saved him. That night, driven by curiosity and inner conflict, John returned to the arena. There, he found Reno and Frankie watching a brutal fight that ended with Reno's fighter badly injured and rushed to emergency care. When the doctor declared Reno's fighter unfit for the next round, John stepped forward and volunteered to take his place. Just before the match began, Mr. Wolf arrived, demanding Reno repay his debt. Reno promised it would be settled after the fight. As the match kicked off, John and his opponent exchanged fierce blows, thrilling the crowd as the intense first round drew to a close. In the next round, weapons were allowed, and John's opponent quickly seized a steel rod to strike. Though he took heavy blows, John stood firm and, relying solely on his bare hands, managed to overpower his adversary, securing a stunning victory. Back in the locker room, Reno handed him the prize money, but John chose to share part of it with the injured fighter he had replaced. A few days later, after his morning run, John was surprised to find Reno and Frankie waiting for him. Reno urged John to take on another fight, reminding him of the money still at stake. After some hesitation, John agreed. To help with training and preparation, Reno even offered for him to move in. Before the next match, they met Deacon the referee at a restaurant to go over the fight's terms. During the conversation, Reno admitted he was bankrupt and couldn't afford to place a large bet. John faced another hurdle with his unresolved parole status. but after a tense negotiation, he persuaded Deacon to let him fight. Desperate for money, Reno pawned a treasured heirloom ring belonging to his father, a legendary fighter, as collateral for the match. Later, Reno introduced John to a man named Nestor, but the meeting took a dangerous turn when Nestor, enraged over unpaid debts, ordered his men to kill Reno. John acted swiftly, intercepting Nestor's men before they could strike. Boldly, he proposed a deal. If he won the fight, Nestor would spare Reno. If he lost, John would assume Reno's debt. Nestor agreed, and the intense 10-minute, $10,000 match began. John dominated from start to finish, landing powerful blows that left his opponent unable to continue. John swiftly knocked out his opponent, sealing his victory, and he and Reno left the area without delay. On the way home, John received a call from Veronica. Her daughter Sarah had collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. At Sarah's bedside, John's anxiety deepened as he saw the fragile girl, and he vowed to do whatever it took to secure her surgery. Later, after leaving her room, he overheard a conversation between Reno and Frankie in the living room. Frankie confronted Reno, accusing him of exploiting John to pay off his debts. Reno denied the claim, dismissing John as just an ex-con and far from the noble person Frankie imagined. He even hinted that Frankie might have feelings for John. Their argument was abruptly interrupted when John unexpectedly entered the room. That night, as John prepared for another fight, Reno apologized for his harsh words. Despite winning match after match, John still hadn't earned enough to challenge the reigning champion. As John's reputation grew, fear rippled through the fighting scene, causing several opponents to back out. Undeterred, Reno reassured John that he would find a challenger. One evening at the bar, John noticed two men watching him from a parked car, bodyguards of Veltz, a mob boss to whom Reno owed money. While Reno was away gambling, Veltz's men confronted him, and Reno desperately begged for more time to settle the debt. Veltz's men gave Reno a week to repay the debt, or Frankie would pay the price. That night, John battled a fierce Mexican fighter in a brutal match and emerged victorious with a stunning performance. Afterwards, John, Reno, and Frankie went to a bar to celebrate. Over drinks, John questioned why Reno hadn't been more strategic in planning his fights. Reno explained that as John's fame grew, so did the stakes of the bets, forcing them to keep fighting just to cover mounting expenses. Shortly after, John received a call from Veronica and rushed to her home with Frankie. There, he found her unconscious beside a letter revealing that Sarah's organ donation had been canceled, plunging her into despair. Without hesitation, John took Veronica to the hospital. While waiting, he confided in Frankie about the reasons behind his decision to enter the underground fights. All John ever wanted was to save the daughter of the man he had once accidentally killed. When he learned Veronica had regained consciousness, he hurried to her side and explained that he was fighting to raise money for Sarah's surgery. Meanwhile, Reno went to reclaim his father's ring from the pawn shop, only to discover it had already been sold for a much higher price. Furious but powerless, he realized it was too late to get it back. One night, John fought Nestor's men again. Reno and Nestor then set a $150,000 wager match. John urged Nestor's men to surrender, but Nestor refused. Fearing he might kill his opponent, John quit, handing Nestor the win. Meanwhile, Veltz's men caught and brutally beat Reno for the late payment. The next day, Veltz's men forced John to a lavish house, where he met Veltz, his construction boss's father-in-law. Grateful that John saved his son-in-law's life, Veltz promised to grant any request. John immediately asked for $150,000 to pay for Sarah's heart surgery. John's second request was to clear all of Reno's debts, but Veltz agreed to grant only one and left the choice to John. John chose to settle Reno's debts. Afterward, he decided to leave Reno and Frankie, planning to move out. Grateful, Reno thanked John for freeing him from his burden. Soon after, Reno got word of a bet for John to fight the reigning champion, Sharp. That night, John entered the arena, and as the match began, the crowd cheered loudly with music filling the air. Meanwhile, Veronica rushed through the hospital and found Sarah's surgery fees had been paid. John arrived to support her, and she thanked him deeply. Later, Reno and Frankie joined them, and John returned the rings he'd bought from the pawn shop. Reno sincerely thanked John for all his help.